Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rich.
And I'm your co-MC, Rach. Tonight we're joined by our guest, Brendan Conway of Magpie Games. Hey, Brendan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Folks, if you're expecting us to talk about a Forged in the Dark game because this happens to be our summer series about Forged in the Dark games, I am here to tell you that we're not. This is a very exciting opportunity we have because Magpie Games has a Kickstarter for Avatar, the Legend RPG, and Brendan made some time to come on the show so that we could talk about it.
Yeah, it's like an intermission of sorts for our summer series.
Let's go out to the lobby. Do you have that in Canada, Rach?
We had it at the drive-in when I was growing up.
That's what I'm after. Brendan is a returning podcast guest. You might remember him from our Root episode or the Zombie World episode. It's been a while since we've last spoken. What PBTA game has impacted you the most since then? Beyond your own games, of course.
Well, I get to answer with the games that somebody else wrote that I'm just working on, right? Because then that's not my game, so that's fine. So, I get to go with, Nahual by Miguel Angel Espinosa or, Pasión de las Pasiones by, Brandon Land. Okay, fine. No, I got it.
Stop making or being part of all the games,
It's the
Brendan.
6 degrees of separation.
So, I'm currently a little bit in that state of lust, right? We're looking at a bunch of games and sort of saying, ooh, I'd like to run that. That'd be fun. So it's that thing of constantly cycling through a bunch of things, playing them to see what I like and what I can take from them and what I can learn from them. So at the moment, the thing that's living in my head is Voidheart Symphony. In so many ways, it's because Voidheart Symphony is hitting a type of fiction that I really like, and it's capturing ideas that I really like, and it's bringing them into play, but it also has these really interesting mechanics playing with the two worlds and playing with a way to make what you do in the real world operate differently and feel very different from being in the surreal psychological world and landscape. So it's not only hitting fiction that I'm liking, but it's doing that thing that I appreciate more and more, where it poses for itself a difficult problem of design, and then it invents the techniques necessary to actually address that design problem.
Well, that is really exciting, Brendan. I think your lust may turn a lot of people on here. Well, why don't we jump on over here and read a sitch? Read a sitch.
In Read a Sitch, our guest will bring up some topic or subject of PBTA play or table culture that they feel should be spotlighted a little bit more. Brendan, what did you want to talk with us about tonight?
The thing, it's been orbiting in my head a little bit because of some of the design work on Avatar Legends, the RPG, but it's always sort of lived in there, especially in the work I did around masks, and I've just been seeing it, noticing it more at the table. It's the issue of intent versus action, and it's the space where, on its face, a lot of what we take out of, say, Apocalypse World is a really useful mode of understanding what we're doing at the table, where to do it, you do it. You describe the character doing the physical thing, that move triggers. It's very clear and one-to-one, but we all know that for nearly every one of those moves, there is a degree of interpretation, there's a degree of adjustment, there's a degree of conversation, and then in particular for masks, this started leaping out to me even more because it was that thing of you use your powers to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So saying, generating ice in your hand is not the same move if I'm generating ice in my hand to throw at somebody as it is to generate ice in my hand to make somebody feel better because it's a super pretty ice flower that I'm trying to trade off in class. And that notion that the physical act in the fiction of the game, generating the ice in my hand, is actually less important than the intent behind the action is a really useful and interesting piece of technology built into PBTA. It's common, in a lot of RPGs, we have to talk about this and have this conversation, but the structure of moves gets us to do it much more frequently much more openly, is that the move you were trying to trigger? Is that what you're actually looking for? Oh, you wanted this move. Okay. So what it sounds like you're doing is a little bit off. Maybe we can think about a rephrasing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in Avatar Legends, the RPG, where it's like going through the TV shows and the comics, characters use bending all the time.
Yes.
They don't just use bending to like punch each other. They use it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, suddenly, it's not bending itself that is the trigger of the move. It's the intent behind the bending that matters. And it means I have to ask the question, when you lift that rock, what exactly are you hoping to do right now? It's especially something that comes through in the social stuff is what I have now really fully come to appreciate. The concept that I can say the same phrase, but then we want to get on the same page so that I'm not necessarily held accountable for, like, I didn't realize you would interpret what I just said as a straight up threat. I did not realize that was a thing. And so the GM thinks I just made a threat. I did not mean for it to be a threat. That's something that we at the table want to get on the same page with, so that at the very least I can be like, oh no, actually I think it's really funny that the NPC thinks I was threatening. I wasn't, but I think it's cute. And now I'm cool with it. Or, oh, okay, got it. You weren't threatening, it's just, let's get on the same page and understand this moment so that the correct move can trigger, even though we still also need to know what I actually said.
Right. I find that really interesting in lots of different PBTA games. And I've ended up at times as the MC talking through, okay, it could be this, it could be that. Let's look at the move results to see if that's where you were intent. Like, that's part of the intent as well, is, okay, well, you can't really get this move to give you that result. Therefore, like you said, rephrase it, restate it, twist it around a little bit.
Yeah, I was speaking in the context of when I've GM'd games and I sometimes see players, for lack of any better description, flailing at moves, where I have to step aside as the GM or the MC and say, so what are you trying to accomplish here? Not as a way to question them, but as a way to kind of suss out what move they could be triggering. Brendan, do you have any advice or thoughts about ways to encourage players to be more forward with their intentions?
I think it's always just a matter of, if there's a lack of clarity or something's not quite fitting, just talking about it openly, just bluntly and simplistically being, oh, I'm trying to get him to blank. And a lot of times I play with players who do the thing where they're like, I stare at him angrily and I raise one fist slowly. I'm trying to get him to back down. They say all of that almost as one complete thought, describing the action followed up by the intent. And it works. It fits in that moment because it now instantly aligns us. It doesn't somehow distract us or break us out of the moment. There are often, like the example I just gave may have been one where nobody at the table is going to be at all confused when I look angrily and lift my fist slowly. But if you just add the additional information, it only ever can help bring people onto the same page. And this is not the kind of system where, for any reason, you'd want to say, well, I don't want you to know what my intent is. I'd like to be coy and hide what I'm truly after.
Oh, God.
Everybody at the table.
Yeah.
It's a thing where PBTA really works well with some dramatic irony. It works well with, I know that you're lying to me, even though my character does not know that the character is being lied to. And I can kind of get excited about that. And all of those little moments of player versus character knowledge mean that it's good to have all the players on the same page, even if the characters aren't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to your joke about having the player being very secretive about their motives and actions, I do find that's where PBTA struggles a little bit, when players want to be vague about what their character intentions are. How would you work with players to discourage that kind of playing your cards close to your chest and instead letting their character all out in their glory?
I do think that at some level gets down into the particulars of the game that we're playing.
Mm-hmm.
But many, many, many of the PBTA games wind up dancing in a realm of melodrama, in a realm of over-the-top feelings or action or not necessarily subdued stuff. And that in and of itself can help, because the player who's trying to play it quietly, I can always sort of emphasize the intensity of everything around them or the intensity of the other characters, eventually there's a feedback effect and it gets reflected back at the GM. But even at its most simplistic, it's that conversation and the drilling down. Okay, so you did this thing. What exactly are you trying to do? And if the player says, I don't want to say, that is the point at which I feel like we're at a different level of discourse where I need to say, okay, cool, but I can't figure out what move is being triggered until we get an answer to this. So the game can't move forward. So, like, what were you trying to do? And just making it kind of normal, especially if I can turn to another player and have them be an example of it first and make it clear this player is definitely playing a character who's a liar. They're trying to trick you. They're trying to mess with you. And we all at the table are very well aware that that is exactly what they are trying to do, and we are game for it.
The approach of slightly dense, polite but firm about, no, we're going to get to the mechanics, which means we've got to have a little bit of a conversation.
Exactly.
It's not perfect. There's some people who really want to play a mind game with you, and they're just not playing within the spirit of PBTA. Do the best you can. It's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And to speak to the ones who really are trying for the mind game, there's the other move I have used sometimes, which is to then tell them what move I think they're triggering. Because if I'm not triggering the one they want, they'll get upset and they'll let me know.
Nice.
And then we're right back where we should be. And if they're perfectly happy with the one I called out, great. Everything moves forward. It was just fine.
We were talking a little bit earlier about over-the-top action and emotions. So, Brendan, if we would step on to our next section, Open Our Brain, I think we're going to go into those topics in a little bit more detail.
Open your brain.
In Open Your Brain, our guest discusses an Apocalypse Engine game or mechanic. If they aren't a designer, we have Brendan. He designs in his sleep. And so we're going to talk about a game. Avatar Legends, the RPG currently on Kickstarter, is what we're going to talk about. Avatar Legends RPG. What is this thing? What's it about?
So Avatar Legends, the RPG, is based on Avatar, The Last Airbender. It's based on The Legend of Korra. It's based on all of the attendant comics, the 2 novels set in the Kyoshi era. That entire world, it's building off of the stories of Avatar Aang and Katara and Sokka and Toph and Korra and Asami and Mako and Bolin, and playing in that world and that space to tell these fun stories of often younger characters discovering themselves, but generally speaking, characters who are caught in difficult, almost moral, but also sort of just conceptual or ethical or personal struggles between these principles, trying to decide what they think their balance is. Balance is a huge idea in this overall setting. Balance in the world at large, balance inside of an individual self. Balance is the thing to seek, and it is, of course, the hardest thing to achieve.
One of the challenges I've seen in licensed games that are about one story or one group of characters to shake the world is the, so are you going to meet Princess Leia in this game?
Oh boy.
Do you get to hang out with Luke Skywalker here?
Mm-hmm.
Your stats won't be as good as Han Solo's, though. Don't even try.
I've read the stats for Elric of Melniboné, so I know I can beat him. Brendan, how does this game position itself vis-a-vis these very, very iconic characters?
You just gave me nightmares of the idea of somebody reading the stats for Aang and going, I know I can beat him.
It's gonna happen.
So, part of the big advantage we have with a setting like this is actually that the world is pretty huge. This is true as well, as you pointed out, of the Star Wars examples. And it's the classic thing in Star Wars. How do you tell stories in and around Luke and Darth Vader and everybody else? Well, you find these holes and these additional spaces because it's a giant galaxy and there's lots of stuff going on at any given time. I think of the many number of times the story of how we got the Death Star plans has been told since the original movies came out. And so it's kind of like that, where you exist in the world. There are plenty of stories. There is plenty of injustice to fight. There's plenty of people to help and protect. There's plenty to do. And the entire concept of this setting, you have the Avatar, this one individual who can bend all 4 elements, and they're supposed to keep the world at balance. And that job is enormous and hugely difficult. And so, of course, they're busy. So, at its most simplistic, they can't be everywhere at once. The likelihood that any given person in this world actually runs into the Avatar is not especially high. But then if you want to bring these characters into your game, we have some of these rules for bringing in, we're calling them legends. So NPCs exist at one of 4 different levels. They're minor, or they're major, or they're masters, or they're legends. And the legends are these named characters from the show. They're these people who have achieved incredible things, and they're very significant, and most often the thing that they're going to do when they come into your game, in part because you are good guys, they are good guys, you may have one of those good guy misunderstandings that leads to a little bit of the fisticuffs, but once we're done with that, we should get along, because generally speaking, we're all good guys. They can teach you. So part of what we're aiming for here is like an airbender learning airbending from Aang's son Tenzin in Korra's era. Or we're imagining the concept of learning earthbending from Kyoshi, or learning waterbending from Katara in Aang's era after the end of the 100-Year War. They are experts who are capable of passing on this knowledge, which then, of course, is just a great way to introduce all manner of additional awesome, fun, cool stories.
What mechanics are different in Avatar Legends versus Apocalypse World?
One of the biggest ones that's going to be immediately obvious is it has an entire combat exchange system. For people familiar with Masks, one of the useful ways we've come to learn to sort of describe it to quickly get across the intent is imagine if a single directly engage roll became a tiny little minigame. And there's a moment where you're picking your approach. Are you going to advance and attack? Are you going to defend and maneuver? Are you going to evade and observe? Within those approaches, you have access to some basic techniques. Everybody can do the basic techniques because everybody who can participate at this level is a competent enough fighter to have those things under their belt. But then you'll have your own special techniques, maybe something from your playbook. Maybe you've learned some special firebending techniques or sword techniques. And that's also why you train with some of these experts. You can learn more techniques from them as well, build out what you can do. And so it's a more complicated kind of thing than just a single roll-off move, but it opens up the door to all manner of additional complexities within that fight. From when I want to create ice across the entire floor in order to make sure all the guys charging at me are slipping and sliding. Oh, but then they respond. They're all going to jet step up into the air, fire shooting out from under their feet, and they're going to come down on top. And we get all of those moments supported by these techniques and these exchanges.
Does that change the rhythm of how combat plays in Avatar versus other PBTA games?
It definitely does. We, just by virtue of the system, are going to spend more time in it. It is just a little bit more than rolling the dice once and just being entirely done. But what it also means, though, is that there are choices you can make inside of that fight that are more complicated. We were talking about it today, and Mark Diaz-Truman put it as this system is essentially allowing you to create a custom move on the fly when you get into this moment where your options are unique to you, tied to this particular approach. And you may be choosing things that straight up have to do with taking out your opponent, but you may be choosing lots of oblique other options that don't directly have to do with that. Maybe you want to break that tree, block a path, keep the bad guys from getting at those refugees who are running away. Or maybe you would like to actually talk to your opponent in the middle of exchanging punches with them and figure out what their balance principle is so you can start poking at it. All of these additional little bits and pieces where over the course of the game you'll be shaping the options available to your character by virtue of getting more of these techniques, so that when we get to the end you will have a almost bespoke combat experience. Boy, that felt millennial.
what's your favorite move or mechanic in the game and why?
In the process of writing this, I realized there was another one I want to call out. It's relatively small, but it is just such a joy. And it's because when I was setting up the characters that we are going to use perhaps at some point, maybe today, I don't want to spoil things, but there's a fun thing with your backgrounds. This is a relatively early move we made in the game, but you have 6 possible backgrounds and you pick 2. And that was one of those developments where originally you picked 1 and there was something missing, and then we changed it to you pick 2, and suddenly the thing blossomed into this perfect... There's so much information contained in that moment. There's so much available fictional juice just in knowing that I am a wilderness outlaw. So I must be some kind of criminal, but I lived out in the woods. Versus I'm an urban outlaw. Versus I'm a military outlaw. A monastic outlaw. Thinking about like the different combinations and how that instantly tells us so much about the character, while also mechanically, through the basic move, reliance, skills, and training, it gives you access to all of the skills that you should probably have in that background. So if you're an outlaw, yeah, almost certainly at some point you picked up skills in picking locks, right? Of course you would have. If you have a monastic background, there's a decent chance you've picked up some learning, some archaic learning, some historical texts, maybe you've picked up religious texts. If you're military, well, obviously you know all about weapons and military uniforms and things like that. So you get the skill sets, but also it's such a flavorful, immediate descriptor that when a character is introduced and we're just told that information, I can immediately click into an idea of who that character is with almost no other information. But then the actual move. The actual real move I was going to call out is call someone out. So call someone out plays into our entire balance system. Every character in the game, every PC I should say, has balance. NPCs have their own balance, but it works a little differently for most of them. For PCs, you have 2 principles, and they are defined by the playbook. So I'm looking right now at the Guardian. So we have the Guardian who has self-reliance and trust. So the Guardian is pulled between these 2 ideas of self-reliance and trust. They're opposed for the Guardian. Do I just rely on myself and I do everything myself because I can't trust anybody else, I can just trust myself? Or do I let other people do things and take risks, knowing that they might get hurt or they might hurt me? Do I trust them to try anyway? So your balance is going to shift back and forth between the 2 principles, and it's always inverted. So if I have a +3 trust, I have a -3 self-reliance. Call someone out is a fun move because it plays off of this sliding scale to allow you to get people to act the way you want, calling them on their own beliefs and the things that matter to them. So when you openly call on someone to live up to their principle, you get to name their principle and you roll with their score. So that person's got the +3 trust. You can call on that. You can say, look, you have to leave me here. Trust me. I can handle this. Go. Call on the Guardian's own +3 trust to roll with a +3 to get the Guardian to do that. On a hit, they're called to act as you say. They got to do it in market condition. On a 7 to 9, they can mess with you a little bit. They can shift your balance or make you market fatigue if they want. And on a miss, they can turn it against you and make you act according to one of your own principles instead. But the core of it is it adds a little thing to the sort of label-esque element, where balance really does work different from labels and masks. But this in particular calls out this key thing of, I can get you to act as long as I know what your principles are by just calling you in accordance with those ideas.
That is totally the thief calling out the paladin. I love it.
I could totally see how that fits into these types of stories.
Mm-hmm. And it builds on relationships really well. You have to know what motivates that person to be able to manipulate them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a building component to that where the PCs, because we're players at the table, sort of the thing we talked about before, we don't actually think players are going to hide their principles from each other. So mostly it's just that intense moment of relationship drama as one of them calls on the other's principles, but they'll probably know each other's principles pretty well. But this move can be used on NPCs too. And that thing I said where NPCs have their own principles, they just operate a little differently. Most NPCs have one principle, so they sort of go up towards that principle. They get more and more committed to that thing, especially as they interact with these pesky and annoying PCs who keep frustrating plans. So you can learn the NPC's principle, come to figure out what they're up to, what they're after. There are a few ways you can get the just direct, clear, certain information of it. But also, all you have to do is name their principle. Meaning, if you, in play with that NPC, you're like, I'm pretty sure I know what you're about. I'm going to call you out on your principle, and I'm going to name it despite never having used one of the moves that just explicitly tells me what it is. Obviously, we encourage GMs to be like, if they get close enough, don't worry if they have literally the exact same word. Just it's as long as they have the key core idea. But they can learn about the NPCs just by seeing how they act, what they do, and then call them out on that idea.
Oh, Brandon, you've gotten me pretty excited here. What do you think about us going over and doing some AP? I thought Rach could be the avatar, not could be a cabbage vendor, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that good? Mm-hmm. Just jump over and do some of that?
And you're in a fight.
Yee!
Oh, nice!
It is time to act under fire.
In Act Under Fire, our guest will run a short play segment of their game, in this case, Avatar Legends. All right, Brendan, where do you want to start?
Okay, so some of the first things we would do if we were setting up a game, we would have a discussion about what era we want to play in, what location we're in, what the scope of our game is. Maybe it's the whole world, maybe it's the Fire Nation, what our group's purpose is. We would build out essentially the pilot episode of our TV show so that we don't necessarily play through it. You don't want that pesky moment where the one PC is like, I realize I have no reason to spend time with any of you. I'm out. Bye.
Womp womp.
But for our purposes, we're going to skip most of that and just kind of get into it. We're going to be playing in Aang's era. We divvy up the eras by the Avatar, but we also set them in a particular moment of time. So in Aang's era, we are after the end of all of the comics, which is to say, we're after the end of the 100-Year War. Fire Lord Ozai has been defeated. The world is trying to reconfigure itself. Fire Lord Zuko is in charge, and we're dealing with complicated questions about what do you do with an area of the Earth Kingdom that was invaded by the Fire Nation, but the people there now identify with this new identity based on that 100-year duration of it having been a colony, and so on and so forth. Countless of these difficult questions are now cropping up, but this is like the real work of the Avatar on a daily basis. We're going to be in Ba Sing Se, the enormous megalopolis. I have a thing for them, in the Earth Kingdom. You know, it's got the many ringed sections where it's got the upper ring, which is very wealthy, and it's got the lower ring, which is known to be pretty impoverished. We're going to be in that lower ring where there is a small community of Water Tribe refugees who managed to build a life for themselves after some of the terrible things that happened during the 100-Year War. They fled the Southern Water Tribe, they fled maybe some of the colonies in the north, and they managed to eke out a home for themselves, like their own little neighborhood inside of Ba Sing Se. But now trouble is setting in because there's this pressure. The war's over. There's no reason for outsiders to be here. And this group of people has kept to the Water Tribe traditions. They have never just utterly assimilated into Earth Kingdom culture, wearing only sort of the greens and the pale greens and the browns. They're proud of their identity and their culture. And so they are beginning to have trouble with local powers who would like their land, essentially, who would like that part of the city to fall into their possession so maybe they can turn it into whatever they want. You, therefore, you guys, are here to protect this part of town. You're here to defend it. You've decided that your group purpose, the thing bringing you together, is stopping that. Stopping these people from losing their homes. Stopping this corruption, this intimidation from taking what they have built away from them.
Nice.
Everybody cool?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
All right.
I'm into it.
I figure real quick we'll just do introduction of the two characters, by which I mean I just want to hear like the background. If you want to put a spin on any particular details you want to add to it, and I would especially emphasize when we do training, which I'd like to hear you mention, we have you pick your fighting style as well. So your fighting style is like the thing that is special about the way you use that training. So your training is weapons, great. But your fighting style is boomerang. Or your training is waterbending, and your fighting style is ice sheets. Like I sort of slide around a lot, like Iceman on just those ice rivers that I throw out in front of me. Whatever the case might be, it's the unique thing about how you use that style that makes you cool and visually interesting to see on the screen.
I am playing Plussy the Bold. Background is military and urban. His demeanors are impetuous and impatient. And his training is firebending. And I think I'm just going to go with the style within that training of firebending. He has a giant flaming sword that he puts his hands together and then draws one as if he's drawing a weapon, as if his hand is the sheath, you know?
Nice.
It looks scary, you know, because it's fire.
Yeah, it sounds pretty scary. You just make the sword, right? You don't need a thing in your hand. Yeah, nice.
I just draw the sword out of... I've worked on it for months.
Excellent. So just to make sure, for Plussy, military urban background, you're in town and defending this neighborhood. Is it because you're trying to make up for something that you may have done, or you're trying to make up for your nation, or you've been ordered to do this thing?
Oh, I love the making up for my nation. Like, there's a whole lot of guilt. Maybe Plussy served among the Fire Nation, so he's trying to do right by some people, and he's got a lot on his ledger.
Yeah.
One might say.
Perfect. It's great. And since the bold is all about you're trying to prove yourself, right? You're trying to prove that you actually can be great, are great. People should take you seriously. That fits perfectly. All right, now tell us about Juan.
Yes, I'm going to be playing Juan, the idealist. Her background is privileged and outlaw. Her demeanors are compassionate and joyful. And her training is waterbending. Her fighting style, I'm going to go with the label downpour. Imagine having the ability to pour an ice-cold bucket of water in a situation. Literally.
Nice.
No subtlety.
Nice. I like it. So you rely on freezing water as one of your big things. I like that a lot. Do you carry water in traditional sort of waterbender water satchels on your arms, or do you just carry like a pail of water all the time?
I think it might be a pail of water.
Yeah.
Just like if we're hanging out, might be nearby. If we're going to combat, sling it in under my arm. Because she is an outlaw. It's not very fashionable or graceful. It's practical.
That's perfect. I love it. And so you are a privileged outlaw, which is to say you're obviously associated with some kind of outlaw criminal element, but also you're not at all poor. You come from a pretty upper-class upbringing. So why are you here in this part of town in the lower ring of Ba Sing Se trying to protect these people?
I think in the aftermath of the 100 Years' War, Wong came to a realization that, particularly with being a waterbender and from a relatively high social class, that wasn't a privilege given to many other of her people. So she's made it a point to go and try to make a positive difference in the world, probably against the best wishes of her family.
Who are also clearly criminals.
Shh, we don't talk about that.
Okay. That money came from somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
That's perfect. I like it.
Is there a water mafia that we're developing now?
It kind of sounds like it.
Great.
Oh, no, we made it Fury Road.
I mean, is that what it is? I feel like actually, just as that last little detail, it's easy to imagine one of the big problems facing a gigantic city like Ba Sing Se is supplying enough water to the city for everybody to get what they need on a daily basis. if there are these water tribe people here and a couple of them are secretly waterbenders trying to lay low, trying not to get caught out by anybody, maybe they kind of create a little bit of a cartel around getting water into and around the city.
Ooh.
Oh, I completely agree. That and water treatment.
There it is. Yes.
You don't want to send poisonous water for your system.
It's perfect. So there's this water mafia. Oh, it's great. They're the liquidators, of course.
Oh, no.
All right. So obviously there would be a whole bunch of additional little steps when we would make a character, ranging from describing more about your background to filling out connections that just make sure the characters are connected or they have feelings towards each other. For our purposes, the one big thing I really do want to call out is you can, at character creation, shift your balance one step toward either principle. You don't have to, but you can. So your balance normally starts at your center. Your center is kind of that static point that it can shift over the course of play, but that's a long-term kind of change. Your balance is going to shift much more frequently, and every time there's sort of a reset, every time we would more or less cut to a new episode, it's going to go back to your center. But for the moment, you can shift your balance. So normally it would be at 0-0, but you can push it one step to either side.
Yeah, I'm going one step towards confidence, which is one step away from loyalty.
I knew you were untrustworthy. It's really tempting to go a step towards action, but I think I'm going to stay right in the middle.
Cool.
Very nice. Also, this would probably be where we pick up in the sense that you've met, you're not meeting for the first time, but you don't have to know each other particularly well in this setup. This is not the kind of thing where you've been a team for months. This is episode 2 is where we're picking up. So you're still learning about each other, but you've sort of committed to work together for this shared purpose. So going into it, we'll just have that in mind, that the two of you are still learning about each other, but you do kind of know you're both committed to this overall purpose as we push forward. Cool?
Sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we cut in on a scene of this neighborhood that you're trying to protect. Since I don't think it would necessarily have the greatest name in the whole of the city, it almost certainly has its own name that the people who live there are proud of. Again, like a piece of home that means something to them. But it's tough to get around the fact that the rest of the city just refers to it as Icetown. And here we are in Icetown. You both got a tip that today a member of the Dai Li was headed to Icetown. The Dai Li is sort of the secret police of the Earth Kingdom. They were the ones who ensured that, quote-unquote, there was no war in Ba Sing Se during the time of the 100-Year War. They were the ones who more or less were ruling with Long Feng as their administrator, secretly the power behind the throne. They're not necessarily, shall we say, a noble or virtuous group, but they continue to have power even after some of those events. Their remnants had too many contacts, too much of a hold over the city. And there is a Dai Li agent coming to Icetown today. Not certain for what yet, but we're cutting in on the two of you racing down the street to get there in time, because it sounds like neither of you live here, of course, right? Like, one of you is rich, so of course you live in the upper parts of town, and the other one of you, you're former military. I would assume maybe you're put up in a barracks somewhere, especially with maybe some other Fire Nation defectors or Fire Nation former soldiers or veterans who may have come in nearby.
Yeah.
So the two of you are racing down the streets. I almost imagine you arguing with each other as you go. Well, why didn't you hear earlier? Why didn't you hear earlier? A little bit back and forth. And you come upon a scene of the Dai Li agent wearing the hat of the Dai Li, wearing the uniform of the Dai Li, and she has her hands covered in the stone sort of rocks that are symbolic of the Dai Li, their signature. And she's holding a scroll. As you run up, you see a shopkeep from Icetown finishing with a little stylus, putting the last of a signature on the scroll. Who's the shopkeep?
I think the person we see is just signed. Their name is Kikik.
Kikik?
Excellent. So Kikik owns a pretty important store. I would imagine it's like a little bit of the grocery store for Icetown. It's the one everybody goes to. It's the one where everybody gets the food and general supplies that they need. There are probably other market vendors, but everybody knows Kikik. Everybody trusts Kikik. Kikik does not price gouge. Kikik gives probably a little bit of leeway to people who live in Icetown. Generally speaking, Kikik's like a good guy and is pretty well liked. And again, there's that one moment where you see the drip of a single drop of ink falling from the stylus as Kikik lifts the stylus away from the page. That's when you run onto the scene. The Dai agent begins to roll up the scroll.
Do we get any impression of what's on that scroll before it's rolled up?
It sounds to me like you're trying to assess the situation. In particular as well, you can read a lot into the way the Dai agent is standing. You can read a lot into the expression on Kikik's face, too. So let's go ahead and do that with a roll with creativity.
Ooh, that's a 9.
Excellent. So yeah, that means on a 9, you're going to ask one question from the list, taking +1 ongoing when acting on the answers. Your options are, what here can I use to blank? Who or what is the biggest threat? What should I be on the lookout for? What's my best way out, in, or through? Or who or what is in the greatest danger?
The obvious one to me is who or what is in the greatest danger.
Yep. So the thing you see on that contract, and you've seen contracts like this, right? Your upbringing, you've seen them moving between hands, between your parents, between older relatives probably. It is a transfer of ownership of a property. Kikik is in the greatest danger. Kikik may be about to sign away everything that he owns. The Dai agent finishes rolling up that scroll and tucks it into their belt, and then she pulls out another one and says, and if you would just sign this as well, and the relocation will begin.
Well, Juan, you were the one who observed it, so anything you want to throw out about?
Yeah, Juan's definitely thinking about this, and then here's the words relocation. And again, we've established she's seen contracts before. She's going to stomp up to this Dai agent and say, wait, you're not even giving Kikik a moment to reconsider? What kind of contract law nonsense is this? This is really stupid.
Nice. So it sounds to me like you're triggering a playbook move, perhaps?
Yes, the one that's called Your Rules Stink. Which is when you stand up to an adult by telling them their rules are stupid. Roll with passion.
Excellent. So hit it.
I'm a very passionate person. 11.
Wow.
Very nice. So what happens on an 11?
On a hit, they are surprised by your argument. They must shift their balance or offer you a way forward past the rules. On a 10 plus, both.
Excellent. So the Dai agent must both offer you a way forward past the rules and shift her balance. So it's worth saying that for NPCs, as I mentioned before, they only have the one principle. So their balance, generally speaking, goes up. It just goes up from 0 and it gets higher and higher and higher. If your balance ticks off the end of the track, you lose your balance. Which is to say, you obsess over that principle to agree that's not healthy for you or anyone around you. Bad things happen. But it does end conflicts. When somebody loses their balance, they're out of here. They may do something drastic and terrible first, but they're out of here. So it is a way to deal with and get rid of opponents. It just has its risks. It's not a straight up, they are guaranteed to give in to you. They might give in to you, but it might not. So, with that said, she's got to do both. So, she's going to shift her balance up, and then she's going to offer you a way forward past the rules. Excuse me. I did not mean any offense. If you would like to examine the contract, I'm sure that would be perfectly satisfactory, seeing as it is an entirely legal document, and you do appear like you might be of enough standing to understand. You can tell
I'm burning it.
You can totally do that. Yeah, so she pulls out the scroll and she's about to hand it over to Juan, and Plussy, you just whoosh.
I am impetuous and patient, so I could do the thing.
I loves it. I loves it. So the thing is, like, at some level, burning a piece of paper, not at all uncertain. Not a problem. Burning a piece of paper being held by a trained expert Dai agent who would prefer you not burn said piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit riskier. So I think what we're going to go into is rely on your skills and training. Because you are a trained soldier and firebender. So this is definitely in your wheelhouse. Quickly sending out a jet of flame. Right, jet of flame, fireball?
Jet of flame.
All right, so when you rely on your skills and training to overcome an obstacle, gain new insight, or perform a familiar custom, roll with focus.
And this character is made for me? Maybe not with my playstyle in mind, because I've got a focus of +2. It's amazing. Oh, that is barely a 7, thank God for the +2.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice. So on a 7, you do it, but you do it imperfectly. I'm going to tell you how your approach might lead to unexpected consequences. You take those consequences or you mark a fatigue. Everybody has 5 fatigue, and one of the ways we like to think about it is you have fatigue, you have conditions, and you have your balance. Fatigue is a pretty short-term resource. You'll get it when you get more time to rest. It can recover relatively quickly compared to the others. Conditions are a lot like conditions in masks. They're emotional states. They can cause trouble for you. They can slow you down. If you run out of fatigue, you can't choose to mark it, and any additional fatigue inflicted on you becomes a condition.
Okay.
If you run out of conditions and you need to mark another one, you're taken out. That's the point at which you do submit. At some level, you're out of it. You're done. So, marking a fatigue, at the moment, you've got all 5. It's relatively safe. The consequences I'm thinking right now is you shot that jet of flame real quick. The Dai agent's going to try to get the scroll out of the way as quickly as she can. She's not going to do it. You still got a hit. But your jet of flame doesn't stop at the scroll. It's going to go past and catch a piece of a nearby building. It's not going to like cause an instantaneous inferno. That would have been a miss. It's just going to start a fire, which if not dealt with is going to cause trouble. So do you want to take that or mark a fatigue?
I think there's a moment where Plussy sees that jet about to go too far and grunts with the effort. And he will take a fatigue because that's, it's not a thing.
Reels it in. That's perfect. The scroll is now caught on fire, and the fire you put out is not just the teensy little flame as it touches the scroll. The thing is caught aflame. Even if it is put out literally this moment, it would still be heavily damaged. So the Dai agent drops it to the ground and starts stomping on it to put out the fire, but while she looks back up at you, ingrate! How dare you! That document bore the seal of the Earth King!
What? Oh, sorry. I saw a bug.
You saw a bug.
Very, very dangerous.
Easily mistaken for a seal.
You're under arrest. In the name of the Earth King and the Earth Kingdom, you will come with me. And she begins to approach straight towards you. Plussy, what do you do?
Yeah, I think I'm going to turn and book it.
Nice. There's that moment where maybe this could have been a fight, maybe it could be run, and I like it because that's perfect, yes. Whee!
Lousy conversation anyway, go!
Juan, are you going to run with Plussy, or are you going to cover?
I'm going to cover.
Nice.
In the hopes this agent leaves and I could snatch up that contract, because this might need some social engineering.
Nice. Okay, so you want to slow down the Dai agent, right? Like, you're trying to keep her from catching up to Plussy too quickly, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
What exactly?
I'm going to let her give chase to Plussy, but as she's running away, use that water from my bucket of water I've got carrying. It's kind of like have a pool of water, whack her in the back of her head, dousing her and catching her off guard.
Very nice. So I like it. I think in this case, it could kind of be a rely on your skills and training. But again, this is where intent is coming in. To me, it reads a little bit like a trick. You're trying to get her to ignore your pal and come after you instead, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so that's going to be a trick. Why don't you roll with creativity?
That is barely a 7. Again,
Wow.
lucky.
This is pretty good. It's pretty good. Getting some hits here. All right, so on a hit, they fall for it and do what you want for the moment. She's going to be coming back for you as you smack her in the back with that water. On a 7 to 9, pick 1. On a 10 plus, pick 2. So you're going to pick 1. Do you want her to stumble? You will take +1 forward against her. Do you want her to act foolishly? I'll tell you what opportunity you get. Or do you want her to overcommit? And she's deceived for some time.
Act foolishly, because the optics of that in this water tribe enclave are going to be very powerful in the long run.
I like that. Yeah. That's a pretty fantastic angle. So that's, I think, exactly what it is. You smack her with the water, she turns around, and in anger, there is actually a moment, like you're holding a pail, but this is a little water tribe community. It's not as if water is not a feature of this place, and there are other people of the community around who are wearing water tribe garments who might have done this possibly. She hasn't seen you explicitly waterbend in her face yet. So she's looking around, and you can see a snarl twist her face as she just goes, "You disgust me." And she stomps her foot, and cracks race out from her foot to reach the buildings on either side, which begin to crack, and like pieces of them start to fall inward. But the instant that happens and people are coming out of their houses, they're all looking at her in anger. And you find yourself backed up by the residents of Icetown. The opportunity you're getting is like, they're not cowed by her. She miscalculated in this moment that they would just run. And they're not, and they're standing behind you. What do you do with the whole group behind you? What is the last thing that we're going to do?
Do I have the opportunity to triumphantly grab this contract?
The one she stomped out? Yeah, she ran and left it on the ground. So it's half burned. You can pick it up off the ground.
Well, I'm going to pick it up off the ground, and before I run away, say I thought the Dai Li had more trained focused.
Oh. Snap!
And then you're just going to go where the crowd just parts for you. So you just run, and then they form a wall. And you see her come up and try to get past them. And of course, they're not budging. And like in the distance, as you get further and further away, she's trying to lift pieces of earth and push them to the side. And they're doing everything they can to stand in her path. You get away perfectly as the citizens of Icetown rallied to this moment, protect you. And we can close there. Who knows what the contract holds? What dark clauses live in its inky scrawl? Tune in next week.
Plus, he's going to find some deep military secret in it. I just know it.
Wow. Brendan, that was thrilling. I really enjoyed the chance to try a bit of Avatar Legend, the RPG.
Thank you so much for playing. Yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to run it for you.
Yeah, it was great. Brendan, if any of our listeners want to follow more of your work online, where can they find you?
Pretty much everything I do is with Magpie Games, so if you just follow our Twitter @MagpieOfficial, you'll learn about any of the new projects and stuff. Our Facebook page is pretty active as well. And this Kickstarter itself, it runs from August 3rd into the very beginning of September, so make sure to hop on that when you get a chance. Check it out. There's a really cool video that we're going to put on and show it, so we're super excited for it.
Thanks again, Brendan.
Thank you so much.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, metal version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Can you hear the footsteps in the shadows? Can you smell the metal tang of blood on the air? Can you feel the veil between worlds slipping away with each heartbeat? The between is here. The Between is a tabletop role-playing game about a group of mysterious monster hunters in Victorian-era London. These hunters learn about monsters and killers throughout the city and conduct investigations in order to neutralize them. Over time, they become aware of the plans of a criminal mastermind who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. They will eventually be forced to confront this mastermind in order to save Queen and Country. The Between is directly inspired by the TV show Penny Dreadful, but also takes inspiration from British horror classics, the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, pulp-era media, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and from Hell. It's powered by the Apocalypse and uses the mystery system from our hit game Brindlewood Bay. The Between comes with a 129-page rulebook, 7 playbooks, 10 scenarios or threats, a mastermind campaign sheet, reference sheets, and a supplement called London at Night, The Unseen. The Between PDF is available now on the Gauntlet Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Gauntlet. The Between will be available on DriveThru RPG starting June 14th.